Good evening YouTube, welcome back. Well, it's been a while, but here I am again. And today I'm going to take you back to the mid-2000s and talk about Battlefront, also known as... That's right. This juggernaut of a video game was released in September 2004 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, PC, Mac, as well as for mobile phones. Battlefront, or Battlefront 1, or Battlefront Classic, or Battlefront 2004 is one of the most, if not the most successful LucasArts crossover of all time. Being not only worshipped and beloved by Star Wars fans all around the globe, but its highly addictive gameplay and overall solid quality reached also gamers who were not necessarily fans of George's space epic. And its legacy lives on, to this day. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Battlefront was a big success for LucasArts, and soon after the release it became clear that it was more than just another very solid and highly entertaining video game. It was a true milestone, and its long-lasting triumph was the company's first step into its new, and ultimately, final era. But how did this come about? In early spring of 2004, Jim Ward became the new president of the video game department of LucasArts. After a detailed and extensive revision of the company, Ward noticed clear and alarming warning signs on the horizon. He quickly realized that LucasArts had to be modernized and restructured from the ground up to remain profitable and competitive in the ever-changing, expanding and evolving video game industry. However, he also knew that an extensive refloat of the company would come at a price, and the price was going to be high. During the massive reorganization of LucasArts, about 260 employees had to leave the company, and numerous video game projects, some of them which were already in pre-production, were put on ice or cancelled entirely. It was decided that in the first place LucasArts would re-establish itself as a publisher of video games first and developer second, especially when it came to Star Wars titles. In the following years, LucasArts would develop only very few games on its own. Instead, the company provided the Star Wars license in increasing manner to external developers. The amount of major releases per year was reduced, and the company would from now on invest in fewer and generally better thought-out projects with promising premises and concepts, which seemed to be a way more profitable and customer-friendly approach than to throw out one half-baked game after another on the market, like LucasArts did for the most part in the last couple of years. Quality over quantity was the slogan. Jim Ward also understood that the era in which the PC was the dominating platform of video gaming was coming to an end. He saw that the console market was already pushing the staggering supremacy of home computers to the wayside, and it became clear that consoles would become more present, attractive, and also more lucrative in the future. Though there was no need to cancel all PC ports altogether, LucasArts would from now on devote its attention in increasing manner to consoles like Xbox and PlayStation. During all these radical changes and internal shakeups, Battlefront was already in development at Pandemic Studios, and not only would it survive the turmoils around it unlike many other projects, it became also the project in which LucasArts saw the biggest potential. In the following months, it became clear that LucasArts would bet most of its money on one card. And that card was Battlefront. Back then, the success of multiplayer-oriented war games, or as I like to call them, war sandboxes, was on the rise. And thanks to pioneering, groundbreaking and ungodly popular game franchises such as Battlefield or Call of Duty, they would remain reliable moneymakers and system sellers in the following years. Instead of focusing on a narrow level-to-level scheme, the developers of such war sandboxes threw gamers straight into the center of the thunderous and frantic battlefields. The player took control of one of the many unnamed jarheads and would fight for his side on the ground, behind torrents, in vehicles, armored vehicles, and in the air. Quick reactions, sharp skills, teamwork, as well as a clever tactical and strategic approach on the often huge and detailed maps would be the deciding factors over triumph or defeat. The gameplay itself may be very bare bones, but it's easy to get into, effective, fun, and above all, addictive. The intensity of the gaming experience could be even increased, as the player could not only play on his own during the single-player campaigns or instant action matches, but could also prove his gained knowledge and talents to other players, to those who were in the same room, and to those who were online. In the early 2000s, war shooters were practically a license to print money, and became especially popular on the console market. In the tradition of other long-lasting and best-selling video game franchises like Madden, new installments and expansions of games such as Battlefield and Call of Duty would be released on a yearly basis. While the core of the game remained mostly the same, from release to release, however, the edges were more and more removed, the gameplay refined and extended, the graphics polished, and the performance optimized. If it works, don't fix it. And by designing most of the games mod-friendly, the already established loyalty of the customers and gaming communities was ensured even more. LucasArts knew that the most logical thing to do now was to combine the concept of the war sandbox with the rich resources the Star Wars universe had to offer. With war being part of the franchise's title, the makers knew that they had a potential match made in heaven in their hands. After all, every single episode of the Galactic Saga featured at least one very iconic and popular battle scenario, just waiting to become finally experienced by gamers in its entirety. Of course, players were already given the opportunity to revisit some of the most classic battlefields of the Star Wars universe many times before, but never was the battle itself the main focus, at least not in the intensity, large scale, and high detail in which players would get to experience it in Battlefront. As mentioned before, during the extensive restructuring and reframing of LucasArts, Battlefront was already in production at Pandemic Studios. The development and pre-production on the project began in early 2002. However, early internal tests and examinations of the game in progress by the quality assurance of LucasArts were underwhelming and alarming, to say the least. Disappointed and concerned by the at best mediocre review scores, Jim Ward now feared that the game developers at Pandemic might not be up to the challenge after all, and that they would not exploit the full potential of the game to the max. The first, highest and only priority was now to bring the uncoordinated and troubled production back on track. This was achieved by regular quality controls and an overall more open exchange of information and improved communication and cooperation between both companies. The production and first glimpses of the game were widely covered by many major video game magazines, and to increase further customer interest, the folks at LucasArts decided to use the highly expected release of the original Star Wars trilogy on DVD to their advantage, by adding a Xbox exclusive demo of Battlefront as a bonus feature on the much desired disc set. Marketing-wise, it paid off and proved to be a very successful move. Soon after, a PS2 demo was also released with Sony PlayStation Magazine. Star Wars Battlefront finally launched on September 21st, 2004. So after re-examining the troubled production history of today's title, which luckily resulted in this humongous success story that Battlefront still is to this day, let's take a closer look on the game itself, and let's start with the gameplay. All four crucial warring factions of the Star Wars saga, the Galactic Empire, the Rebel Alliance, the Old Republic, as well as the Confederation of Independent Systems are present in Battlefront. In every match, two factions will face each other. However, due to the timeline, the factions are strictly divided in two groups. So the Rebel forces won't fight against the droids of the Confederation, and the Clone Army will never face the Stormtroopers of the Empire in battle. At least not in the original version of the game. Right after the iconic loading screen disappears, the player is thrown right into the action, as he takes over the control of a random soldier on the field of honor. The goal of each and every battle is simple: crush the armed forces of your opponent, or cut them off from the strategically important command posts. Since the reinforcements of both sides are not infinite, taking over the command posts of the enemy is crucial. The more command posts the player has under his control, the more reinforcement he'll have, and will therefore dramatically reduce the number of troops of the other faction. If the player manages to take over all control posts on the map and is able to defend them for 20 seconds, he will win automatically, regardless how high the troop strength of his enemy may be. Aside from the instant victory through taking over the control over all command posts, the match will end as soon as one side runs out of its units and reinforcements. When injured, the player can heal himself by picking up power-ups or stand by the medical FX droids who will cure him from his wounds, while the Gonk droids will provide him with additional ammunition. On most maps, both armies will fight on their own against each other. However, on a handful of planets there are also native forces who can be aggressive towards both or one side. For example, the Tusken Raiders on Tatooine will open fire on anybody who will dare to come close to their territories, much less when he'll try to take over one of their command posts. On the contrary, the Jawas at Mos Eisley won't join either side, as they'll be too busy with repairing the torrents which will get destroyed during the battle. The Ewoks on Endor will fight intrepidly against the Empire, and the Geonosians will open fire on the clone army of the Old Republic. The presence and appearance of such planetary neutral forces is a welcomed addition, and makes the already intense gameplay even more immersive. By the time of its release, the graphics of Battlefront may have not broke any new grounds, but they were more than acceptable. I think that the overall level design is a textbook example really on how to managing, saving and how to place your resources at the most critical and crucial places. Because yes, the models may be designed simplistic, but that on the other hand allows the game to run very smoothly. There are practically no lags or slowdowns during even the most heated and most crowded battles in the game. And I would definitely say that the graphics have stood the test of time and have aged surprisingly well. The many maps of the game are all very well designed, and there is more than enough variety in the environments. Everything, from intense street fights to huge battlefields and open areas, it's all here. Of course, there is no shortage of many familiar locations the player will recognize, so there really is a sense of discovery and exploration as well. Originally there were 16 maps to play on in the game. However, the Palace of Jabba on Tatooine was added later via update. Thus it's also the only map that did not make an appearance in the campaign mode. There was no original music written and recorded for Battlefront 1. Instead, the soundtrack consists of the more than familiar John Williams themes known from the movies. This was the standard procedure with Star Wars video games when there was no original compositions recorded for one. And while the original Williams soundtrack is always good to hear, in all honesty, during the game, it almost becomes a background noise, and only rarely will it be noticed by the player and make his blood boil. It's just kinda there, that's it. But at the same time there is no real complaint here, as Williams' music is always a welcomed addition to a Star Wars video game, and there is hardly a way to make it sound bad. The game's soundtrack was even nominated for the Best Soundtrack Award by the Computer Games magazine in 2004. Every warring faction in the game has 5 types of ground troops to offer. A 6th unit class for Battlefront 1 was planned, but was ultimately scrapped from the game and made its appearance later on in its sequel. The first and most basic class is of course the standard infantry unit. The simple soldiers use a blaster rifle as their primary weapon, a blaster pistol as a secondary, and also carry grenades or thermal detonators. The only major exception in this class is when fighting for the Confederacy of Independent Systems, as the player will take control over the super battle droids, which aside from the standard fire mode can also use a precise and powerful tri-shot mode, and instead of carrying and throwing grenades, they fire a deadly rocket from the mechanical wrists, which will hit their target straight. Only in the early stages of the Clone Wars campaign, the player will get the chance to play as the standard B-1 battle droid. Next there are heavy units which are equipped with blaster pistols, explosives, mines, as well as rocket launchers which are especially effective when it comes to damaging and destroying torrents and armored vehicles. The third class are the pilot units. Their value on the battlefield should not be underestimated, as not only they can provide the comrades with health packs and extra ammunition, they can also furthermore repair and restore damaged vehicles, as well as rebuild destroyed torrents. There is also the sniper unit, which is protected by recon droids, which are lightly armored yet not easy to target. The sharpshooters carry the standard blaster pistol, but most importantly, highly powered sniper rifles, with which the player can pulverize enemies from a far and safe distance. Aside from those 4 classes, there are also special units for each faction. Mighty Wookiee smugglers fight alongside the Rebel Alliance, equipped with their iconic bowcasters and explosives. The Galactic Empire has the Dark Trooper as their special unit, who carry grenades, a blaster, as well as a modified blast cannon. They are also equipped with jetpacks, which allows them to reach higher places on the map and make them overall move much faster across the battlefield. The jet troopers of the clone army use jetpacks as well. And aside from the blaster and grenades, they carry a powerful EMP launcher. However, the most dangerous and most deadly special units, and arguably the most powerful ground unit in the entire game, are the infamous and feared droidicas. Not only can they move fast across the map when they are in their wheeled form, but once they transform into combat mode, they will fire with their precise blaster cannons and are additionally protected by a deflector shield, which its enemies will have to deactivate at first, before having the opportunity to damage them in a serious way. The skins of some of the ground troops can vary, of course, depending on which planet the battle will take place. There are also some slight differences here and there when it comes to the weapon arsenal of some units between the standard gameplay modes and in the campaign missions. And it's also of note that none other than Temuera Morrison did the voice work for the clone troopers.
Enemy forces have captured a command post.
If the player gets tired from running around the battlefield by foot, he'll have the opportunity to board torrents and laser cannons and bombard his enemies with deadly projectiles. Furthermore, he can take the control over a vast array of familiar and iconic armored vehicles, like the AT-80, the AT-ST, speeder bikes, stabs, spider droids, AATs and many other vessels known from the movies or the expanded universe. On some maps the player can also jump into a starfighter or bomber and take the combat into the air, or simply support his side by covering the ground merciless with fire and destruction. Vehicles which were planned but ultimately not included or cut from the game were among others the Naboo N1 starfighter, the K-Wing, AT-PT, AT-XT, MTT, a playable flash speeder, as well as the Sentinel-class landing ship. While force-sensitive hero units also make their appearance in the game, in Battlefront 1 those are controlled invariably by the AI and remain without exception unplayable. They appear in the campaign mode as well as a bonus feature in the Galactic Conquest mode. They are equipped with a lightsaber, and while it was planned by the makers to also give them force powers like force lightning, force jumping, throwing and so on, those plans however remained unrealized. The Jedi heroes however would finally gain their characteristic force powers back and would become playable units in the sequel, 1 year later in 2005. Every game stands and falls with its gameplay, and if Battlefront gets anything right, it's the gameplay. Action-packed war sandboxes are in my opinion only fun to play when the challenge is well balanced, the AI robust and capable, and then they are of course such obvious basics as acceptable graphics, a good sound design and a gripping soundtrack. And I think all those criterias Battlefront handles astonishingly well. In every battle the player can win or lose, and the game gives him a lot of freedom in deciding in which way or by which strategy he will lead his team to victory. And while there are some minor flaws in Battlefront's gameplay, those are very few and far between. Like for example, by the end of a match, it can happen that the last few enemy units are stuck somewhere on the map, so the player is required to locate them and will often find them running disoriented in a corner somewhere. To sum things up, for its gameplay, Battlefront gets an A- from me. And with that out of the way, let's take a closer look at the single player modes of the game. There are 3 in total: the campaign, Galactic Conquest and Instant Action. Let's start with the campaign. The campaign of Battlefront 2004 is divided into 2 chapters, the Clone Wars and the Galactic Civil War campaign. This mode is very simply structured as you go from one battle to another. If you're victorious, you can continue. If you lose, you'll have to try again. So it's easy going as there are no game overs, and there is the possibility to save your progress after every mission. In the Clone War era campaign, there are 7 battles in which the player can participate. After starting their first campaign, you are greeted with the classic Star Wars title and scroll. It is sort of a shortened variation of the Phantom Menace scroll text. And yes, this is one of those many rushed scroll text sequences in the history of Star Wars games, in which the music is cut short, and as soon as the golden letters disappear, you are greeted with a very uninspired montage of movie scenes from Episode 1, and more precisely the activation of the battle droid army, which is going into battle against the Gungan forces at the great grass plains of the invaded world. After this gripping cinematic extravaganza, you'll get a briefing from none other than Darth Sidious. The instructions you'll get are very general and obvious, and only on a handful of planets that you will fight on there are secondary objectives, and even those are optional and not mandatory, and can be all ignored for the most part. So basically forget everything you heard in those briefings. All you need to do is to set your blasters to kill, eliminate every enemy you stumble upon, and capture as many command posts as you can. Now the battle begins. You'll be playing as the Trade Federation, and the good folks of Pandemic Studios don't waste any time and fulfill the deep, secret wish of 99% of all Star Wars fans in the very first mission of the campaign, allowing the player to commit mass murder on the Gungans. So select your unit class and get going. The Gungans won't appear on any other map than this one, so yeah, enjoy the slaughtering as long as it lasts. Overall, the natives of Naboo are not very skilled combatants, as their only weapons are the energy balls, aka boomers. There is a variety of armed vehicles on this map the player can use, from the Stab over the AAT to the Kadu. As mentioned before, on some maps in the game there are secondary objectives which you can complete in order to give your faction an advantage and the upper hand in the battle. Those objectives are basically destructible command posts of your enemies that cannot be restored, which can become a dangerous disadvantage for them. In the battle on the grassy plains, the secondary objective is to destroy the mobile shield generators of the Gungan army, and to achieve this you need to bring down the majestic creatures which are carrying them on their backs, the Farmbas, which is not difficult to achieve when you attack them with an AAT. With the mobile shield generators gone, just like in the movie, the Gungans are massively weakened and will soon retreat from the battle. Your next assignment will be to end the rebellion in Theed. The enemy this time are the Royal Guards and security forces. And this is the second and last time the B-1 battle droids will appear as the basic infantry units of the Trade Federation/Confederation in the game. The second mission is intense house-to-house combat in the very well designed capital of Naboo. No secondary objectives, no distractions. Just pure adrenaline and fun. The third battle takes place on the Wookiee homeworld Kashyyyk. Here you will fight along your commander Count Dooku against the armed forces of the Wookiee Trade Guild. The B-1 battle droids are replaced with the B-2 super battle droids, and this is the only map in the campaign on which the Mark I droid starfighter is available. Weirdly enough, it can be boarded by a pilot, which is quite unique considered that other than in the Battlefront series, in the movies, television series, games and all other media, those were always depicted as independent droid units with their own cognitive module. But, oh well, I think even the most hardcore and canon-obsessed fans can forgive this compromise the programmers had to make. Did you already get used to the troops of the Confederation? Does it already feel like you're part of the glorious mechanical army? Do you wish to continue to lead the troops of Count Dooku and Darth Sidious from one glorious victory to another? Yes? Well, too bad! Because this was the last time in the campaign in which you had the opportunity to do so. In the remaining 4 battles of the Clone Wars campaign, you'll take the command over the Clone Army. Your first assignment in the service of the Galactic Republic will lead you to the historic Battle of Geonosis. After the obligatory briefing, this time however by Master Yoda, the battalions of the clone troopers will rush into action. And this is the first mission of the campaign that I would call challenging, as the enemy forces will fight relentlessly and are backed by the Geonosians. The command posts of the Confederation are well defended, and even when you manage to capture them, your opponent will be more than determined to take them back as soon as he can. Mace Windu will assist your troops and will chop every droid he stumbles upon to pieces. Thankfully, there is another secondary objective in this mission to break the creeping monotony, and this one as well is quite a challenge, as you'll have to destroy the Techno-Union ships. They however are massive and hard to take down. You may fly with the LAAT gunships to reach them quickly. However, their firepower is not very effective against them. The most efficient way to destroy them is by attacking them with the ATTEs. However, they take forever to get there, and chances are high that the enemy Torrents, the heavy armored units, the Nantex territorial defense starfighters, the Hailfire droid tanks, and the OG-9 homing spider droids will blow them to shreds during their long walk across the battlefield. So yes, it's a challenging, but highly entertaining and very well designed map. The next mission will take you to Kamino. The battle in Tipoca City is standard. No vehicles, no secondary objectives. It's straightforward and no bullshit combat. It's a rather simple mission, and the map with its platform labyrinth is also very well designed and always fun to play. An early trailer of the game showed that originally the player could board and fly the droid and Jedi starfighters on this map, but for whatever reason, this content was cut from the final version of the game. The next mission takes place at the frozen wastelands of Renvar. Next to Kashyyyk, it's the only planet in the game which was not introduced in the movies, but in the original expanded universe. Renvar made its first video game appearance in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which was also developed by Pandemic Studios and is regarded as the prototype of Battlefront. And rightly so. The inclusion of 2 expanded universe worlds was a well-appreciated effort by the programmers in my opinion, even if it's kind of disappointing that there weren't more of them in the game. But hey, better 2 than none, I guess. Just like the previous mission, the battle at the harbor of Renvar is a no secondary objective affair as well. But it's a huge map and you will also have the opportunity to board the TX-130 Saber class tanks as well as the ATTE. The grand finale of the Clone Wars campaign takes you back to Kashyyyk. And at this point it should be mentioned that since neither Renvar nor Kashyyyk appeared in the movies, and there simply was no cinematic footage available for both planets, you have to keep in mind that Revenge of the Sith was not released yet, there are also no introductory cutscenes to both worlds. What? Did you think that the makers of the game would just simply animate them? Pfft, as if. Well, Renvar I can sort of understand, but Kashyyyk? What's your excuse here, Pandemic? Couldn't you just use the footage from the Star Wars Holiday Special? Imagine how fulfilling it would be to see some random clips of this legendary TV production before going into battle, so the player can understand what's really at stake here. Imagine seeing footage of Chewie's family doing absolutely nothing interesting in the living room. Art Carney's shenanigans. Grandpa Itchy's adventures with the virtual porn projector he got as a present for Life Day, or Harvey Korman dressed as a transsexual cooking droid, showing Mala how to cook food for the armed forces of the Wookiees. The opportunity for greatness. It was right here, Pandemic. In your hands. And you blew it. Shame on you. But anyway. In the second battle of Kashyyyk you will fight at the docks. Your side will have a serious disadvantage though, as only the forces of the Confederation will have tanks and vehicles at their disposal. To balance that out, the sharpshooters of the Republic will find some excellent sniping positions on the observation platforms. So yes, defend the docks, destroy all enemy troops, protect and liberate the Wookiees who will join you in battle, and then it's time to end part 1 of the campaign. And your hard-earned reward is to watch low-res Phantom Menace footage of the victory parade in feed. So there, enjoy it. You've earned it. I think. So on to the second chapter of the campaign, the Galactic Civil War. After sitting through or much rather skipping another rushed and meaningless scroll text, you are again being briefed by Palpatine before you find yourself in the Dune Sea on Tatooine, fighting for the glory of the Galactic Empire, hunting down the rebel scum. This is a very large map and once again there are many vehicles for the player and for the enemy to use. The secondary mission here is to take over the command post of the Tusken Raiders, which, as previously discussed, is easier said than done. And also beware of the Great Pit of Carkoon, or the Sarlacc will get you before the rebels or the Sand People will get the chance to do so. The next mission will take you to Mos Eisley. And again it is time for some urban warfare supreme, as this is easily one of the best maps in the entire game. The labyrinth-esque streets and alleys of the spaceport are the perfect environment for quick ambushes and adrenaline-pumping intense combat action. There are some familiar locations like the Cantina, Jabba's sail barge, the Katana, as well as the wreckage of the Dowager Queen. No secondary objectives here, however you will be able to play with the special units of the Empire, the Phase Zero Dark Trooper. And none other than the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader himself, will assist you in the fight against the rebel forces. The third battle takes you back to Renvar, this time however to the ruins of the Citadel. There is really nothing special about this map, other than it's neatly designed perhaps. But then again you won't find any map in Battlefront that is bland or forgettable, as they all have something unique and exciting about them. The final mission in which you will fight for the glory of the Emperor will take you to the tropical moon of Yavin 4, and more specifically to the ancient ruins of one of the many Massassi temples. Once again there are no secondary objectives here, but taking over and holding the command post in the middle of the structure is advisable. And you can also board the AT-STs, while the rebels will fight your forces with their combat speeders. After this battle you will defect to the Alliance and fight for the Rebellion until the end of this campaign, and from now on Admiral Akbar will take over the mission briefings. The fifth mission in the Galactic Civil War takes place once again on Yavin 4, immediately after the destruction of the first Death Star. The second Yavin map is larger than the previous one and is way more fun to play in my opinion. Again, there is a crucial and essential command post on this map. It's located at the ruins of the stair area, which soon will be paved with countless corpses of those who will fall in the brave attempt of conquering it. The next mission is the legendary Battle of Hoth, which is in my opinion one of the best, if not the best map in the entire game. Again, it is one of the larger ones. In the desolate wastelands of the ice world there are multiple ways to fight the enemy. Both sides can ride the agile and fast Tauntauns, and the infamous and feared Blizzard Force of the Imperials of course have their squads of deadly AT-ST and AT-AT walkers. And the rebels will try to take those down in their snow speeders. And yes, of course you can also attack them with your harpoons and tow cables. So go for the legs. Additionally, Commander Skywalker will join and assist you and your troops. When playing with the Alliance, it is essential to hold and defend the shield generator, because just as with the mobile shields of the Gungans on Naboo, if the generator gets destroyed, the rebels will permanently lose a command post for the rest of the battle. After the skirmish in the snow, it is time to change the scenery. And luckily the next mission takes place at Cloud City, high above Bespin. This again is a very great and fun to play map, with some familiar places to discover like the Carbon Freeze Chamber. After the liberation of the city in the clouds, you will stay on Bespin and you will help the rebels in defending and taking over the main Tibana mining platform, which was previously raided by an Imperial garrison. On this map both sides can board starfighters and bombers, but when piloting them better beware of the deadly torrents on the ground of the platform. And now finally the last mission of the Galactic Civil War, and with that the final battle in the entire campaign, the Battle of Endor. And if there is anything that you remember from this iconic battle that showed up in episode 6, then there is a high chance that you will find it again somewhere on this map. Except from the AT-AT and the landing platform maybe. However, speeder bikes? Check. AT-ST walkers? Check. Sneaky, murderous, war crime committing and blood-hungry, cuddly teddy bear creatures that will willingly assist the rebels in their combat operations? Double check. And there is a secondary objective as well. Remember when the Imperials destroyed your shield generator on Hoth? Remember how pissed you were because of that? Well, it's payback time, so grab a speeder bike and return the favor by blowing up their shield bunker. This achieved, the battle is almost certainly won. And after successfully completing the last mission of the campaign, you can finally sit back, catch a breath, and rejoice by watching the footage of the final victory parade of the special edition of Return of the Jedi. The end. And that's really all there is to say about the campaign. And look, there is just no other way around it. It's a huge letdown and a big disappointment. The whole experience is just very lackluster, and it really comes across like a day before single player feature. And what I mean by that is when you're playing it, it really comes across like it was the day before the project was due and Pandemic had to hand over the game to LucasArts, and they were like, oh my god, we forgot the campaign. Well, we will cobble something together in a couple of hours. The issue is that there is just nothing special about it, other than perhaps to use it as a tutorial if you're new to the game, I guess. And playing through and completing the campaign will have absolutely no effect on the rest of the game. There is just nothing to unlock there. There are no secret maps, secret vehicles or character units that you can unlock. There is just nothing. Nothing! Just the fact alone that there are no cutscenes for Kashyyyk or Renvar, I mean, it just shows you what a low priority and whole afterthought this campaign was. You can tell that nobody cared about those friggin' cutscenes, because in some cases they start immediately after you choose the battle you're gonna fight, and in other cases they start as soon as the lame mission briefings are over. There is no particular order to this. It feels more like a glitch or programming mistake that no one bothered to fix after testing it. Other than that, you're just jumping from one mission to another. There is no real story or narrative, or no new or unique special characters you can play as. You're always just a random, unnamed and disposable foot soldier with no personality, so there is no real emotional investment here. Even during the mission briefings, there is no interaction between you and the person that gives you your orders. For God's sakes, they didn't even bother to throw in a static profile picture of the commander in there. I mean, it's not like Battlefront was released in the early 90s, where fans perhaps may have very much been in awe and excited when they saw some footage from Star Wars movies included in a video game. Like, for example, back in 1993 when Rebel Assault 1 came out. Yes, back then, that might have been something special. And I think it's pretty safe to say that by 2004, we were way past that point. All jokes aside for a moment. The biggest failure of the campaign, in my opinion, is that for the most part, and by most part I mean 99%, the maps in the campaign play exactly the same as they play in the other two single-player modes, with exactly the same secondary objectives on some of them. There is just no difference. So in the end, yeah, there is just no point in delving into the single-player campaign, in my opinion, especially if you ever have played it before. There is zero replay value here. But enough of this negativity and the unfortunate campaign. There are two other single-player modes, so let's continue and take a look at them as well, shall we? Let's just skip ahead briefly to instant action first, because it's actually fairly simple to explain. You have to choose on which and on how many of the 17 maps you want to play on. Choose if you want to play in the Clone Wars or Galactic Civil War era, and simply put them into order like a playlist. So basically you can design your own campaign here. Make your choices and boom, the battle begins. So now let's take a closer look at the Galactic Conquest. In my opinion, the best single player mode of the game. The concept is simple as well. Your mission is, well, to conquer the galaxy and to wipe out your enemy. After choosing your faction, you'll see that the galaxy is in the hands of your opponent, and now you will have to travel from planet to planet and liberate all worlds in the galaxy. All 8 of them. Every planet, except for the main headquarters of your nemesis, has 2 maps, and on both of them you need to be victorious in order to conquer it. Every world has a unique planetary bonus, like vehicular sabotage, elite training, Bacta tanks, or the help and the services of a force-sensitive hero unit, which can drastically enhance your chances in combat and weaken your enemy. As soon as you have taken over the control over a world, you can use its bonus in future battles. Furthermore, after 4 victories, every faction gets a unique bonus on their own, which allows them to destroy or to take over a planet instantly. When all planets are conquered, a final battle will take place on the enemy space planet. If you also manage to bring him on his knees here, victory will be yours and you will have conquered the galaxy. And just like in the campaign mode, you can also save your progress here, after or before the missions. So yeah, it's a very fun, albeit somewhat underbaked feeling single-player mode, but maybe I'm just saying that because at this point I'm so spoiled by Battlefront 2, where the Galactic Conquest mode was also featured and it was just a little bit more refined and extended and overall a lot more fun. However, in 2004, when this game came out, I played Galactic Conquest here over and over and over and over again. The game's great and robust and overall very solid gameplay mechanics easily overshadow every noticeable lack of variation, and the experience rarely becomes dull and or boring. Let's face it, war sandboxes are in almost all cases always designed in the first place to please the enthusiasts of multiplayer gaming. Star Wars Battlefront is no exception here, because its multiplayer mode rocked back then and it still rocks today. And I think everyone who played this gem online back in the early days could tell you many great stories of all the glorious unforgettable matches he participated in. Originally on the PC or Mac, up to 64 players were able to face each other on the battlefield via LAN or internet connection. The multiplayer modes of the PC and PlayStation 2 versions of Battlefront were supported by GameSpy, whereas the Xbox utilized Microsoft's Xbox Live network. However, playing Battlefront online on the Xbox is no longer possible, as the original Xbox Live servers were shut down in April of 2010. And when GameSpy also closed their gates 3 years later, the seemingly endless party on the official servers was over on the PC and PlayStation 2 as well. However, there are still some independent servers online, and it's still possible to play the Battlefront 2004 multiplayer online even today. Dedicated communities and clans still exist, and if you play the game on your personal computer, you can join them, for example, via Game Ranger. As we know today, all the intense and hard work by the developer Pandemic paid off in the end, because after its release it became more than evident that Battlefront did not only fulfill the expectations, it surpassed them. Battlefront was a home run for both LucasArts and Pandemic Studios. Commercially as well as critically, it was a huge success, and up to this point in time, it became one of the best and highest selling Star Wars video games ever, and it started its own acclaimed series of games within the line of other Star Wars titles, with more sequels for multiple gaming platforms to follow the first installment in the years to come. Star Wars fans fell in love with it, even more when in late 2004, in a clever and long-sighted move, LucasArts and Pandemic released the Star Wars Battlefront BF Builder, a modding tool that allowed players to create their own maps. With the help of other tools and programs, the possibilities for new creations with the BF Builder became practically endless. Needless to say, the fans got to work quick, and guess what? Some of them are still active to this day. After a direct follow-up, 2 other sequels/spin-offs were released as PSP exclusives. A second, eagerly awaited sequel titled Battlefront 3 by Free Radical was unfortunately cancelled in mid-production, and only some concept art and leaked video footage of the gameplay remained from that production. Despite this backlash, the Battlefront series became so successful that even after the highly unfortunate liquidation of LucasArts as a direct consequence of the whole hellish Disney deal, Battlefront survived. Sort of. Because Disney as well as EA, the new publisher for future Star Wars titles, realized that burying such a successful series would be a moronic move. And the series was rebooted with Star Wars Battlefront 2015, also known as Battlefront EA, developed by DICE. And because of its success, history repeated itself as the new Battlefront also got a direct sequel 2 years later. Financially, the decision of rebooting the series paid off. Critically, however, both got a mixed and lukewarm reception. And many veterans of the original series will agree that the new installments, despite of their great graphics, just were not able to recapture the special feel and magic of the originals. So yes, one can still feel the aftershocks of the gigantic success of Battlefront 2004. And that brings me to my final verdict and rating of the game. And let's get the negative stuff out of the way first. The single player is lacking. The campaign is a joke. And then there are some shortcomings here and there, like the absence of space battles and unplayable hero units and the average AI. But as we all know, and as I have previously mentioned, Battlefront got a direct sequel only 1 year later, where all these flaws that I just pointed out were corrected. Which on the other hand makes the first game kind of hard to recommend today, especially if you never played it before. Then I would almost advise you to skip it and just jump right into the more superior sequel. I really don't want to come across too negative, too nitpicky and too critical here, but when I'm rating a game, especially an older game, I have to put it in perspective and I have to reevaluate my experiences with it. I have to remember what it was like when I played it for the first time in 2004 and what my experience was revisiting it. And the good thing is that despite all the few but legit gripes I had with this game, I can tell you in all confidence that there is some very high quality to be found here. And I would never dare to understate the importance and success that this game had. For the most part, it stood the test of time, and the things it does right, it does so right, There is a reason why this became such a phenomenon. You just have to keep in mind that it was and still is a multiplayer affair first, single player second. So yes, despite the existence of the superior and more popular sequel, I'd say check this one out as well. And I highly encourage you to revisit Battlefront once more, because it's worth doing so, even if it's just for nostalgia's sake. And if you have never played it before and you call yourself a Star Wars fan, well, what the hell are you waiting for? This is common knowledge. But whether you're familiar with it or not, I'm pretty sure that you can still get a lot of hours of straightforward, great entertainment here. And my final rating is a 7 out of 10. However, it's more an 8 than a 6, but a 7 nonetheless. And there you go. Please, by all means, tell me in the comments below, what were your experiences with Star Wars Battlefront 2004? Do you like the game? Do you don't like the game? What would you rate it? Do you think it still holds up? I'd be very curious to read all your opinions. And if I have made some mistakes in my review, or have forgot to mention something very essential about the game, or just simply spread misinformations about Star Wars Battlefront, feel free to point that out as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, take care.